The word actually did more damage than Grant Alcott probably intended. Actually, Corinne and I are in a really different place now. He said it to the venture capital director standing 3 feet from where Corinne Baxter was still holding her event clipboard, still wearing her small silver coordinator's pin, still managing the gala she had spent 11 weeks building from scratch. We've grown apart, so this is Serena. The woman beside him smiled, tall, deliberately positioned at Grant's shoulder, wearing a dress from an editorial Corinne had bookmarked once and quietly closed without saving. Corinne didn't move. She had been reaching for a glass of water from the passing tray when the sentence hit her. Her hand was still in the air. 11 weeks. That was how long she had spent on the Meridian Hospitality Group's annual gala. She had chosen the venue, the florist, the lighting rig, the menu, the seating chart that placed the right investors across from the right conversations. She had scheduled the musicians, confirmed the dietary restrictions, personally walked the kitchen staff through the evening's timeline. She had done all of this while also attending 3 planning dinners at which Grant had come along and been introduced as her partner. Now, he was dissolving that partnership in front of the venture capital director, who had shaken her hand 40 minutes ago and said he was excited to finally put a face to the organization. The clipboard in her hands felt heavier than it was. Someone, she never saw who, whispered her name. Not loudly, just enough to confirm that other people had heard. Corinne! Grant's voice softened slightly, took on that particular quality he used when he was about to explain something to her like she'd misunderstood. I meant to have this conversation privately. He shrugged. It came up. She didn't answer. She was counting the decorative votives on the nearest table because she had learned a long time ago that counting things stopped her face from doing whatever it wanted to do when she was humiliated. 43 votives on that table. 40-40. A sound crossed the room. Not a voice. Footsteps. Measured, deliberate, arriving from the direction of the balcony corridor where the private investor suites were located. No one spoke as the man approached. That was the thing Corinne noticed first. How quickly the ambient noise of a room full of industry professionals dropped when a single person moved through it with intention. He was tall, dark suit charcoal tailored close, no tie. A watch that caught the light once and didn't try again. He looked at no one as he crossed the room. He was looking at her. He stopped beside her, close enough that she felt the warmth of his jacket before she understood what was happening. He had removed it in the last 3 steps without breaking stride, and now it settled across her shoulders with the same quiet certainty as everything else about him. And the kind... Then he reached for the clipboard in her hands. Not grabbed, not rushed. He simply covered her fingers with his and waited half a beat until she registered the gesture and let go. Then he turned to face Grant. You introduced yourself to Hargrove earlier tonight, he said, nodding toward the venture capital director. Said you were a consultant for the Meridian Group. Grant frowned. Yes. Interesting. The man's voice was low. Conversational. It didn't ask for the room's attention. The room gave it anyway. Because I've reviewed the Meridian Group's consulting contracts for the last fiscal year, your name doesn't appear in any of them. Grant's jaw shifted. I'm in an advisory capacity. Which she arranged. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture. He simply stated it the way gravity states itself, by being undeniable. Along with every other introduction you've made in this room tonight, I'd imagine. The venture capital director was no longer smiling at Grant. He had taken a small, instinctive step backward, which was not the direction a man takes when he's thinking about handing someone a business card. Grant's face cycled through several colors and settled on a shade Corinne associated with his worst arguments. And who are you supposed to be? No one answered for Grant. The room did it instead. in fragments, in quick, lowered voices that reached the nearest ears within seconds. Julian Sark. That's Sark from Sark Holdings. He never attends industry events. Why is he? The venture capital director straightened his spine the way people do when they realize they've been standing at the wrong end of a conversation. The woman in the editorial dress took 2 very careful steps to the left, increasing her distance from Grant without appearing to intend it. Grant's jaw tightened further. This doesn't concern you. Sark looked at him with the patience of someone who had already decided how the situation would end and saw no urgency in arriving there. The event you're currently attending, he said, was organized by this woman. The room you're standing in was arranged by her. The investors you've been speaking to were seated by her, next to the conversation she thought would benefit this organization. He paused. That concerns me. You don't even know her. I know enough. Grant forced a short laugh that came out wrong. You know enough. You walked over here and, swooped in. I walked over, Sark said, because no one else did. The room breathed, barely. Corinne still hadn't spoken. She was looking at the side of his face, trying to locate the memory of him somewhere in 11 weeks of venue walkthroughs and contractor emails and budget revisions. She couldn't place him. But the room placed him, and whatever the room knew about Julian Sark, it was enough to make Grant Alcott look smaller than he had ever looked standing beside her. That was a thing she had never thought possible in 3 years. He took her hand from behind, just his thumb and 2 fingers around her wrist, a grip that said, stay. She felt the pressure. She looked down at his hand. Then a different hand appeared at the edge of her vision, open, offered, not insisting. She looked up at Sark. He didn't say anything. He simply waited, giving her the choice without making a performance of it. Corinne Baxter had spent 3 years learning to be grateful for small mercies. She recognized this as something larger. She took the hand he offered. As they walked toward the corridor, she heard Grant's voice behind her, sharpened by the desperation of a man who realizes he has miscalculated. Corinne, don't be dramatic. You're making a scene. She stopped. Not because the words stopped her. She had heard versions of that sentence. So many times it had become ambient noise, but because she wanted to do one specific thing before she left this room. She unpinned the small silver coordinator's badge from her lapel, the one that said event organizer, the one she had put on at 6 that morning and worn through 11 hours of setup. She turned back, walked to Grant with steady steps, pinned it onto the breast pocket of his jacket with 2 precise clicks. Then manage it yourself, she said. She turned around and didn't look back. The car was quiet, black, low to the ground, the kind of vehicle that existed to move through the city without announcing itself. Corinne sat in the back seat and stared at the city lights bleeding past the tinted window and tried to locate the part of herself that was supposed to be falling apart. She had expected the collapse to come immediately. The sudden avalanche quality of the thing she'd held off while other people were watching. Instead, she felt strangely level, like something had been lifted from her shoulders before it could break them. He had taken the clipboard. She kept coming back to that. He had noticed she was still holding it. You don't have to stay, she said without looking away from the window. I know, Sark said. I can call a car. You're already in one. She almost laughed, caught it. I don't know who you are. Julian Sark. That's supposed to mean something to me. It usually means something to people who follow Chicago's investment landscape. There was no pride in it, just information. If you don't follow that world, I don't expect recognition. She turned toward him then, because the bluntness of it surprised her. Most people who were apparently worth knowing responded to not being recognized with wounded patience or performative humility. He'd just stated a fact. "How did you know what he said to Hargrove?" she asked. "I was nearby. The balcony corridor." "Yes." She looked at him steadily. He was watching the city too, and she could study him the way she always studied people when they weren't performing for anyone. The jaw was sharp, unhurried. The hands were still. There was nothing restless about him, which was unusual. Most powerful men she had worked around were always fidgeting with something. A phone, a cufflink, a glass. As proof that they were thinking. This one just sat as though sitting were a deliberate choice. "Have we met before tonight?" she asked. "No." "Then how did you know who I was?" He answered without hesitation. "The Wexford Foundation fundraiser, 14 months ago." She waited. "I attended from the mezzanine for most of the evening. You organized the event." At 9:40, you slipped into the kitchen corridor and spent 12 minutes reorganizing the waitstaff's break schedule, because the original schedule hadn't accounted for the dinner running long. You found the two servers who hadn't eaten since noon, and made sure they got plates before the dessert course went out. Corinne stared at him. 9 months ago, he continued, the Arcadia Children's Literacy Benefit. You organized it. At the end of the night, when the venue's cleaning crew came in at 11, you were still there. You helped them stack chairs for 40 minutes. He looked at her for the first time since they'd left the gala. You didn't know anyone was watching. "I didn't," she said quietly. "I know." The car hummed over the bridge. Below, the river was dark and glittering, the way the city always looked from a distance, full of light that didn't quite add up to warmth. She stopped, tried again. "That's a strange thing to remember about someone." "Is it?" "Most people remember whether the centerpieces looked good." "The centerpieces were fine," he said. "They looked the same as every other event. You didn't look like every other event." She turned back toward the window, her reflection caught in the glass, cheeks flushed. Eyes that had done their best to hold themselves together, and she became suddenly painfully aware of what she looked like in the polished back seat of a car that cost more than her annual salary. She became aware of the jacket still draped across her shoulders, which was also worth more than things she owned. "I keep thinking," she said, "that I should feel humiliated." "Does that mean you don't?" "No, I feel it," she exhaled. "I just can't feel it fully yet. It keeps bouncing off something." He didn't try to name what the something was. She appreciated that more than anything he'd said. The sedan stopped in front of her building. Corinne didn't immediately move. She was looking at her hands in her lap, at the faint dent on her right index finger, where she held her pen during 12-hour event days, at the chip in her thumbnail she'd given herself that morning, prying open an equipment case. "He used to tell me," she said, not planning to order the salad. Sark was still. At industry dinners. He'd say it laughing. He'd say, "You know you'll feel better," and if I ordered something else, he'd get very quiet. She paused. I started ordering the salad. The car's interior held the words carefully, the way a room holds sound after the sauce goes quiet. "At the Meridian Group's last partnership dinner," she continued, "one of their clients ordered the risotto, and Grant spent the drive home telling me that women who ordered pasta at networking events were sending the wrong signal." She glanced up. I had ordered the risotto. He said it like he'd forgotten. "He hadn't forgotten," Sark said. "No," she agreed, "he hadn't." She looked out at the building lobby. The night doorman had spotted her and was waiting with his customary patience. She had brought him coffee 3 times during blizzard weeks when the building's heating went down. He always accepted it gracefully without making it heavy. "I planned that gala for 11 weeks, she said. "I knew his name would be on my arm when I walked in. I thought we were building something." "You were," Sark said. "He was borrowing it." She absorbed that. The difference, he added quietly, is that everything you built tonight still stands. His name isn't on any of it. Corinne sat with that for a moment. Then she got out of the car. 3 weeks went by. Chicago moved at its usual pace, quick, layered, indifferent to private disasters. She went back to work. She organized a corporate luncheon, a non-profit board dinner, a wine distribution conference. She did her job the way she always did it. Arrived early, stayed late, knew every staffer's preference for the order of service, thanked people whose contributions were invisible to whoever was paying the invoice. She didn't watch the video. Someone had filmed Grant's face in the moment the room recognized Sark's name. She'd been told about it by 3 separate colleagues, all of which translated roughly to. He looked terrible. She believed them without needing to verify. Sark appeared at the edges of her life, without announcement and without pressure. A message one afternoon, "I'm told the venue for the Wexford Winter Benefit is giving you trouble. Their operations director has a prior agreement with my firm. I've asked him to cooperate." No explanation of how he'd known. No expectation of gratitude. 2 days later, a coffee arrived at her office. Not a card, a post-it, block letters, long day ahead. That was all. She found herself looking forward to the moments when the phone showed his name. She didn't say this aloud to anyone. She barely said it to herself. The Sark Holdings mid-year investor dinner came 6 weeks later. A private affair at a downtown steakhouse. She had organized the catering side of it, third-party work. She was managing the back-of-house timeline when a server found her at the kitchen pass. "The gentleman in the west dining room is asking if you have a moment, Miss Baxter." She knew before she turned the corner. He was at the far end of the private room, which had cleared of most other guests. He was nursing a glass of something amber and reading something on his phone that he put down the moment she appeared. "Sit down," he said. Not an order, just an assumption that she would, which felt different. She sat. "I want to ask you something," she said before he could begin, "and I want an honest answer." "All right. Why did you walk across that room?" She put her hands flat on the table. "The real reason. Not because I noticed you stacking chairs, the actual reason." He looked at her for a long moment. The candlelight from the table's centerpiece, simple, clean, nothing excessive, caught the line of his jaw. "Because I had been looking for a reason to introduce myself for 14 months, he said, "and I was running out of patience." She hadn't expected honesty that specific. "You could have just," she started, "walked up to you at an event you were working." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "You were always working. You never stopped." He paused. "I didn't want to meet you as an interruption." She sat back. "I wanted to meet you as a person who had time to answer without one eye on a headset." She stared at the table for a moment. Then, what was the question? He reached into his jacket pocket. He set something on the table between them, small, a paper cocktail napkin, folded once. She recognized the logo of the Wexford Foundation venue. She picked it up, unfolded it. Her own handwriting, hurried but legible. "Benny, take your 20. I'll cover the East Pass. Eat something. CB." She stared at it. "I found it under a coffee urn," he said, "at the end of the fundraiser cleanup, after everyone had gone home." He watched her face. "You'd left a note for a busboy so he could take a break. No one asked you to. There was no one left in the building to see it." She covered the napkin with both hands. "I kept it," he said simply. For a long time she didn't speak. The restaurant made its quiet sounds around them. A kitchen door somewhere, a distant conversation, the low hum of a well-run evening. "I don't know what to do with that," she finally said. "You don't have to do anything with it. I just wanted you to know." She looked up. "Why?" "Because you've spent considerable time believing that the things you do aren't worth noticing." He kept his voice level, not gentle in a performed way, genuine. I wanted you to have evidence." Corinne pressed her lips together hard. Not because she was about to cry. She was past the part of this where crying came easily. But because something was shifting behind her sternum, and she didn't yet know what to call it. "He told me I was too much," she said finally. "Too sensitive. Too loud in the wrong rooms. Too," she gestured vaguely at herself, "too everything that takes up space." Sark didn't look away. "And I believed him," she said. "That's the part I can't get past. Not that he said it, that I organized my entire life around it being true. It isn't. I know that now," she exhaled. "I'm still evicting it from all the places it moved in." He was quiet for a moment. "Then that takes longer than 3 weeks." "I know. I'm not in a hurry." She looked at him across the table, at the man who had kept a paper napkin for 14 months because of a 4-word note she'd written for a busboy, who had put his jacket on her shoulders before she understood she was cold, who asked for nothing in the space where other people put conditions. "You should know," she said, "that I'm not going to become someone different. I know. I'm going to keep showing up early. I'm going to keep knowing everyone's name. I'm going to keep caring whether the people carrying the trays got to eat dinner." "I know," he said. "That doesn't change regardless of," she paused, "anything." "I know that too." The faintest line appeared at the corner of his mouth. "It's one of the reasons I'm still here." Grant came back. It happened at the Meridian Group's spring preview, a smaller event, 40 people, wine and past hors d'oeuvres on the rooftop garden of a hotel Corinne had worked with twice before. He appeared in the doorway at 7:15, wearing an expression he had clearly rehearsed. She spotted him before he spotted her. She had time to decide how she wanted to meet it. She decided she didn't need to perform anything. She was finishing a conversation with the venue director about next quarter's logistics when Grant crossed the room and placed himself in her peripheral vision. Corinne. She looked at him. She had the strange experience of finding him smaller than memory. Not physically, the dimensions were the same. But the version of him she'd carried for 3 years had been so enormous. She hadn't noticed how much space her own dread had been giving him. "Grant," she said pleasantly. "The way you say it to someone you once worked with and haven't thought about." He registered the tone, recalibrated. "I've been wanting to explain." "You don't have to," she said. She meant it completely. His jaw tightened. "What I said at the gala was also something you don't need to explain." She set her wine glass down, measured. "Calm. I've been doing some processing of my own. I appreciate the instinct, but the explanation is for you, not for me." "I want another chance," he said, bluntly, because the indirect route had just closed off. She looked at him. She waited to feel something, the old pull, the muscle memory of caring about his approval. She found instead a quiet, settled absence, like a room after furniture has been moved out, not empty, just arranged differently. "No," she said, one word. She didn't elaborate or soften it. He leaned in slightly. "You're doing this because of him. Because Sark." "I'm doing this because of me." Her voice didn't rise. "You can believe whatever makes the rest of it easier, but no." He reached for her arm. Not violent, just reflexive, the move of a man who didn't believe that sentences applied to him. Before his fingers made contact, a hand settled on Grant's shoulder from behind. Deliberate. Sufficient. Sark hadn't appeared from anywhere dramatic. He had been in the room for 20 minutes, Corinne realized, working the edges of it the way he always did, visible only to whoever was already paying attention. "I'll see you out," Sark said. The same tone he used for everything, the tone of a man who made decisions rather than offers. Grant looked at the hand on his shoulder, at the faces nearest to them, none of which had moved to help him, at Corinne, who had picked her wine glass back up. He left, without drama, Because drama requires an audience willing to supply it, and this room wasn't. When the door closed, Sark stood beside her. "I had that," she said. "I know. I was going to manage it. I know." "Then why?" "He reached for you," he said simply. "No more than that." She considered arguing with the logic. She found she didn't want to. The rooftop garden held the particular quality of late April in Chicago. Cold underneath, warm on top, the city lit below them like a version of itself that had forgotten for a moment to be hard. Corinne looked out at it and felt, with something close to surprise, that she recognized her own life in the view. Still the same city, still her life, just seen from somewhere higher. "You kept a cocktail napkin for 14 months, she said finally. "I did. That's a lot of faith in something you didn't know yet." "I knew enough." She studied his face. The precise economy of it. She had come to understand that Julian Sark spent words and gestures like they cost him, which meant when he gave them, they were real. She thought about the woman she had been 11 weeks ago, reaching for a glass of water with her hand, still in the air. She thought about every salad she had ordered to keep the drive home quiet. She thought about the way she used to shrink herself in doorways, as though the air in a room belonged to someone else first. She did not want to be that woman anymore. She was not entirely sure she still was. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay," she said again. "Let's start from the beginning, properly." She offered her hand, not because she needed steadying, because she chose to. He took it without ceremony, without making it larger than it was, which somehow made it larger than anything. Below them, the city moved on indifferently, the way it always had, carrying every version of everyone who had ever stood on a rooftop in April and decided to begin again. The cold rose off the river. The lights stayed on. Corinne Baxter stood with her shoulders level and her head up and her hand in his, and for the first time in a very long time, she took up exactly the amount of space she needed. Not an inch more, not an inch less. Exactly enough.